The CIA reportedly took a technology once confined to hospital ICUs used to monitor the faint magnetic signals of the human heart and adapted it into a battlefield system capable of helping locate a hidden weapons systems officer deep inside hostile territory. That system is being referred to as Ghost Murmur. At first glance, that sounds almost impossible, because we're not talking about tracking a phone, a radio, or even a heat signature alone. We're talking about detecting the electromagnetic fingerprint of a human heartbeat, a signal so weak that, under normal conditions, it can barely be measured even when sensors are placed directly against the body. And yet, claims surrounding Ghost Murmur suggest something far more extreme. Some reports describe the system as being capable of scanning vast areas, hundreds or even thousands of square miles, and isolating a single human presence. That immediately creates a contradiction, because when you compare those claims to known physics, the numbers don't line up. Experts in the field of quantum sensing, including Professor Thad Walker, have pointed out that detecting a biological magnetic signal from even 100 meters away would already be considered a major scientific breakthrough. So now you have two realities colliding. One is the public narrative, massive range, near miraculous detection capability. The other is the scientific constraint, signals that decay so rapidly they become almost indistinguishable from environmental noise within meters.
So the real question is not whether Ghost Murmur exists. The real question is, what kind of system could bridge that gap? And more importantly, what is actually happening behind the scenes that is not being explained? To answer that, you have to go back to the origin of this technology. Not to the CIA, not even to Skunk Works, but to the research ecosystem that feeds them, DARPA. Long before Ghost Murmur entered the public conversation, DARPA had already identified a very specific problem. Traditional sensing systems work well in controlled environments, hospitals, laboratories, shielded rooms. But the real world is different. It is filled with noise, electromagnetic interference from the Earth itself, from electronics, from infrastructure, from human activity. The challenge was not just detecting biological signals. The challenge was detecting them in their native environment, without isolation, without shielding, and without controlled conditions. This is where DARPA programs like Ambient, Atomic Magnetometer for biological imaging in Earth's native terrain, come into play. The goal of Ambient was not to build a better hospital device. It was to take the concept of biological signal detection and push it out into the open world, to see if it was even possible to extract meaningful biological data from an environment that is inherently chaotic. Alongside that, DARPA launched the ROKES program, Robust Quantum Sensors, which focused on building sensing systems that could survive and function in real-world operational conditions. Motion, vibration, interference, temperature fluctuations, factors that would normally destroy the accuracy of sensitive instruments. What DARPA was essentially doing was laying the groundwork for something much bigger. Not a single device, but a new category of sensing, one that could detect life itself, not through active emissions, but through passive signatures. At this point, the technology still wasn't operational. It existed in research labs, prototypes, and experimental setups. That's where the transition happens. This is where Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works enters the picture. Skunk Works specializes in taking early-stage, high-risk concepts and turning them into deployable systems. Their role is not to invent from scratch, but to integrate, refine, and operationalize. They take fragmented technologies, quantum sensors, signal processing algorithms, platform integration, and assemble them into something that can actually function in a mission environment. So when you look at Ghost Murmur, you're not looking at a single invention. You're looking at the convergence of multiple technological streams that have been evolving for decades. At the core of this system is something called Quantum Magnetometry. To understand that, you have to go even deeper, down to the level of the human body. Every time your heart beats, it generates an electrical signal. That's what an ECG measures. But alongside that electrical activity, there is also a magnetic field. This is not science fiction. This is a well-established phenomenon known as magnetocardiography. The problem is that this magnetic field is incredibly weak. It is millions of times weaker than the Earth's magnetic field, which means that in most environments, it is completely buried under noise. In hospital settings, detecting this signal requires highly specialized equipment. Systems like SQUID magnetometers operate at cryogenic temperatures and are placed in shielded rooms to eliminate interference. Even then, the sensors need to be extremely close to the body,
We're talking centimeters. That is the baseline reality. Now compare that to what Ghost Murmur is attempting to do. It is taking that same biological signal and trying to detect it in open terrain, at distance, without shielding. That is not just an incremental improvement, that is a fundamentally different engineering problem. The breakthrough that enables this shift comes from a specific type of sensor, nitrogen-vacancy centers in synthetic diamonds. These are microscopic defects intentionally created within a diamond lattice. One carbon atom is replaced with a nitrogen atom, and an adjacent position is left empty. This defect behaves in a very unusual way.
When exposed to laser light and microwave pulses, the electrons associated with this defect become extremely sensitive to magnetic fields. Even very small changes in magnetic fields can alter the quantum state of these electrons, which in turn changes how the diamond emits light. This is the essence of quantum magnetometry. You are converting invisible magnetic fluctuations into measurable optical signals. And unlike traditional systems, these sensors can operate at room temperature. That is a critical advantage. It means they can be miniaturized, integrated, and deployed on mobile platforms. But even with this advancement, the core problem remains unsolved. The signal is still weak, the environment is still noisy, and the gap between laboratory capability and battlefield application is still enormous. Which means the real story of Ghost Murmur is not just about the sensor. It's about everything that comes after the sensor. And that's where the system truly begins to reveal itself. If the sensor is only the starting point, then the real question becomes, how does Ghost Murmur actually turn that raw, nearly invisible signal into something usable in the real world? And this is where the system moves beyond hardware and into what is arguably the most important layer of all: signal extraction through AI-driven processing. In a real-world environment, the sensor does not receive a clean heartbeat signal. It receives everything: the Earth's magnetic field, background electromagnetic radiation, electronic interference, atmospheric disturbances, and countless other signals are all present at the same time. The human heartbeat, in comparison, is not just weak, it is almost insignificant. This is where Ghost Murmur likely relies on advanced computational models. Instead of asking, can we detect a heartbeat? The system reframes the problem into something far more achievable. Can we recognize the structure of a biological signal hidden within chaotic data? That shift is critical because the human heartbeat is not random. It has rhythm, repetition, and structure. Over time, that structure can be identified, even if the signal itself is partially obscured. This process is known as signal reconstruction and pattern isolation. The system collects massive amounts of raw magnetic data across an area, then uses AI to filter out known noise signatures. The Earth's magnetic field, for example, is relatively stable and predictable. Electronic interference often has identifiable frequency patterns. By removing these known layers, what remains is a much smaller, much more manageable set of unknown signals. Within that reduced dataset, the system searches for repeating biological patterns that match the expected profile of a human heartbeat. But even this does not solve the entire problem, because the system still needs context. It needs to know where to look. And this is where one of the most important and most overlooked details comes into play. Ghost Murmur was probably not operating in isolation. During the operation, the downed weapons systems officer, referred to as Dude 44 Bravo, briefly activated a Boeing Combat Survivor Evader Locator, or CSEL beacon. This was not a continuous signal. It was short, intermittent, and designed specifically to avoid detection. But even a brief activation is enough to provide something critical: a rough search area. This changes everything, because now the system is no longer scanning an entire desert. It is focusing on a significantly reduced zone. And within that zone, multiple layers of intelligence can be applied simultaneously. Satellite surveillance can monitor movement patterns, signal intelligence can detect any electronic emissions, and perhaps most importantly, thermal imaging can identify heat signatures. At night, especially in desert environments, the temperature difference between a human body and the surrounding terrain becomes extremely pronounced. The ground cools rapidly while the human body remains warm. This creates a clear thermal contrast that can be detected from above. On its own, thermal imaging is not precise enough to confirm identity, but when combined with other data layers, it becomes a powerful filtering tool. This is what is known as multi-sensor fusion. Instead of relying on a single detection method, the system combines multiple imperfect signals to create a more accurate picture. Each layer reduces uncertainty. Each layer narrows the search. By the time Ghost Murmur is applied, the system is no longer looking for a needle in a haystack. It is verifying a hypothesis within a constrained area. This is why the environment itself becomes a critical factor. The Iranian desert, in this case, provided what can only be described as an ideal detection environment. Low population density means fewer competing human signals. Minimal infrastructure means reduced electromagnetic interference. No dense urban activity means fewer unpredictable noise sources. In effect, the desert acts as a natural filter. It removes complexity from the environment, making weak signals easier to isolate. This leads to a crucial realization. Ghost Murmur is not just a piece of hardware. It is part of a larger system. So when claims are made about range and capability, they cannot be evaluated in isolation. They must be understood in context. The integration of multiple advanced technologies into a layered intelligence system. Quantum magnetometry provides the sensing capability. AI provides the processing power to extract meaningful patterns. Platform integration through helicopters or aerial assets provides mobility and coverage. And external systems, beacons, satellites, and thermal imaging, provide context and constraint. Together, the system can achieve results that would otherwise seem impossible. So here's the question most people will avoid, but you shouldn't. Are we only seeing a fraction of what Ghost Murmur can actually do? Because if this is just the version they're willing to talk about, then what exists behind it? Think about that for a second. We're no longer talking about tracking devices. We're talking about a world where a person can be tracked, just like a phone signal. Not by what they carry, but simply because they exist. And once that line is crossed, there is no off the grid anymore. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most people watching this will have an opinion, but very few will actually say it out loud. So I want to see where you stand. Do you think systems like this already exist at that level? Or is this being exaggerated to hide the real limitations? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how many of you believe this is real and how many don't. And do this. Send this to someone who always says, "I'll just disappear if things go bad." Let's see if they still believe that after this. Because if even part of this is real, that assumption is already outdated.